sport which never sleeps, the story which never stops.
Button wins! Victory for Mark Webber! McLaren have done it! Rubens scores! Kimi Räikkönen wins!
Rubens, you're on fire. Oh, brilliant drive.
This
Better get used to it.
is Formula One.
After 13 races, over 7 dramatic months, this is the final push.
From Australia, through Asia, and into Europe, the battle has raged.
With casualties along the way.
And as the sun begins to set on the season, just 2 true title contenders remain.
Teammates, friends, we're about to find out.
When the darkness falls in Singapore,
The drama begins. Usually in Formula One, it's lights out that signifies the start of the action. Well, it's very much lights on here in Singapore this weekend. The eyes of the world's Formula One fans have been trained on this place over the past few days, and not really for all the right reasons. But it's now time to refocus our attention on the 4 men chasing that world title. The final push for the championship starts right now with the Singapore Grand Prix live. And what a fantastic setting for round 14 of the 2009 season. Less than 200 miles away from the Malaysian capital of Kuala Lumpur, Singapore is the smallest nation in Southeast Asia. This place may be small, but it thinks big. Home to the first ever night race in Formula One as the cars snake around the waters of Marina Bay, past vast shopping centres, high-end hotels and high-rise buildings in the city's financial district. It's a street circuit with a twist, and not the only novel race during this clutch of season-ending battles. Our final port of call this year will be the first race to start in the lights and end under lights. Another marina, another new home for the sport in the twilight of the Abu Dhabi desert. And who'll be champion once this closely fought season is finally over? Some think there's only 2 drivers in it, others cling to the belief we're watching a 4-horse race with less than 30 points separating the top 4 guys. In the Constructors' Championship, there are a few battles being fought. Brawn and Red Bull for top spot, McLaren hoping to snatch 3rd from Ferrari, and nobody wanting to finish with the wooden spoon plumb last. Well, it's just gone 7 o'clock in the evening here. It's dark, we're under lights, but I'm here with 2 men who are well versed in working late into the night in Formula One. Almost 500 races between them. David Coulthard and Eddie Jordan. And David, 12 months ago, you were focused firmly on driving well and picking up points here for Red Bull. You did just that. But now you're with us, you can see the bigger picture. What's your opinion of nocturnal Formula One activities?
well, last year, quite frankly, I didn't pay too much attention to the fact that we were working on a different time scale, and I just concentrated on driving the car. This year I've had the chance to really appreciate just what a remarkable sight this is, to have a night race.
And Eddie, it's such an electric atmosphere here. When we look at these pictures, it gets you excited about the cars taken out onto the track. It really heightens the excitement, but it's not just where we are and the situation we're in, it's the place that the title battle is sitting at the moment. It's so finely poised.
Well, quite apart from the title battle, it's unique. David has quite rightly said, I have never come across anything like it. It's my first ever visit here for a night race, mind you. I believe they're going to intend to keep that night race because it is fascinating and it brings a huge adrenaline to everyone that participates. But the battle for the championship is all important. And of course, this weekend is no exception. We're going to have a fantastic race, I believe.
Well, it's set up nicely, very nicely indeed, for some action under the lights here. Still to come, we're going to be showing you exactly what happened in qualifying yesterday. We'll also hear from the current Formula One world champion, Lewis Hamilton, as well. But despite all the good things going on at the moment, Formula One still retains that unique ability to overshadow all of its own successes. Sackings, race-fixing allegations, the very integrity of Formula One has been called into question in the past few days. And it's all because of what happened right here 12 months ago. Here's Ted Kravitz.
Nelson Piquet has gone into Renault with immediate effect.
Last year's Singapore Grand Prix was fixed. Nelson Piquet pre-planned his own accident so as to bring out the safety car, help his teammate Fernando Alonso get to the front and win the race. This wasn't spying on other teams or lying to the stewards. This was Piquet crashing deliberately, endangering his own safety for the benefit of his team and his teammate.
Telling them you knew nothing about this?
After he was sacked earlier this year, Nelson Piquet turned informer on his old team. In front of the FIA, Renault admitted that they'd fixed the race, but insisted that the brains behind the plan were Piquet himself, team boss Flavio Briatore, and engineering boss Pat Symonds. Symonds and Briatore paid for the conspiracy with their jobs, but Renault stay in F1.
The penalty for Renault is disqualification, but suspended for 2 years. So what that comes down to is, provided they don't do something similar within 2 years, they don't have any problem.
But this weekend, Renault have been hit in the pocket by the immediate withdrawal of title sponsor ING. The financial services company did not want to be associated with a team that cheats.
Your team's been embroiled in a race-fixing scandal. Your major title sponsor has walked out on you in the middle of the season. How's your first week as team boss going?
It can't get worse, can it? I can only look good in a situation like this, whatever I do, so we'll deal with it.
By being granted immunity, the man who actually caused the accident is free to race again in F1 if he can find anyone who wants to employ him. Pat Symonds admitted that he'd arranged the plan with Piquet and has been banned from any FIA-sanctioned motorsport for 5 years. But after an anonymous whistleblower within the Renault team confirmed that Flavio Briatore knew about the plan, the FIA banned the Italian for life. Flavio's vowed to clear his name, but his downfall has been dramatic. The flamboyant, charismatic showman whose world has collapsed.
What does it mean for the future of Formula One?
I don't think it means anything.
The FIA believe they've drawn a line under the whole affair. Whoever else has bent the rules in Formula One, this will be remembered as one of the worst cases of cheating in sporting history. Has F1 learned its lesson, or are the stakes so high that someone will always look to take the easy way to victory?
Well, I'm sure despite all the goings-on, Romain Grosjean has got other things on his mind as he prepares to take to the streets of Singapore for his first night race in Formula One. We'll show you exactly where he qualified in just a few moments. But Ted Kravitz made the point there, David, that Formula One wants to draw a line under this whole episode. The only way the sport can do that is to convince people of its honesty and of its integrity. Do you think it's succeeding in that mission?
Well, I don't see it as being a difficult job because the integrity of Formula One, for the most part, is very sound, and I don't think a couple of isolated events is going to bring down the whole business. You know, I raced in Formula One for 15 years, and there was always the occasional question mark over some legalities of aspects of the cars, which was addressed by the FIA, but nothing quite like we saw with the Piquet crash here in Singapore.
Well, I'm sure that Romain, who's had a chat with his engineers and gone back out of the garage, and the rest of the Renault team are relieved that the punishment for them wasn't a bit harsh already. But there is a feeling that both Nelson Piquet and Renault got off this pretty lightly. But reputations are everything in Formula One, and they'll take a long time to mend, won't they?
I think they will. I think people still find the whole episode unsavoury, distasteful, and quite shocking. And hopefully, I agree, David, we have to move on. We have to be a bit more positive, but we have to learn by our mistakes. And this was a massive crisis, a massive mistake, and people have been hurt and wounded. So we need to move on and make sure we make it a better job to believe that the people can see that this is a very high-quality, high-skilled sport.
Of course, something that's been mentioned quite a lot is that Formula One isn't adverse to controversy both on and off the track. Does this particular episode from a year ago remind you of sort of any moments in Formula One's past that are similar in some ways?
Yeah, well, as we've been talking off camera, then there was a situation in Suzuka in 1990 where Senna ran into Prost at the start of the race, and that ultimately decided the championship. So we have seen that in the past.
OK, let's take a look at that.
The grid is clear, the lights go!
and Senna sprints away, but Alain Prost takes the lead. It's happened. Alain Prost has taken the advantage. Senna is trying to go through on the inside, and it's happened immediately. This is amazing. Senna goes off at the first corner, but what has happened to Prost? He has gone off too. Well, that is amazing, but I fear absolutely predictable.
Yes, and that makes Ayrton Senna world champion this year.
Well, two drivers battling not just for a race but for a world championship, David. A very controversial incident. A lot of criticism went Ayrton Senna's way. I suppose the difference between that situation and something that we've just seen is that was potentially one driver's own mind deciding something as opposed to a team getting their heads together before a race and having a premeditated incident.
Well, as far as we know, that's the case, and that situation was born out of frustration that Senna wanted the pole position moved from one side of the grid to the other. The then president of the FIA, Belest, wouldn't allow that to happen, and he pretty much declared that he would be either leading coming out the first corner or no one would come out of that first corner. And you know, we all knew what was going to happen potentially, and it played out. So remarkably, the championship was decided at that corner.
Okay, bringing it back to 2009, Mark Webber's come on the record and said he's sick of having to defend Formula One. This sort of stuff needs to end, Eddie, doesn't it?
Well, he's been around a long time, and you know, he's one of the elder statesmen in this business, and by his own nature he is a huge ambassador for the sport, so we should take very good heed of what he's saying, listen to it, learn by it, and actually act on it. We need to act, and we need to act immediately to restore good faith, goodwill, and particularly the C word, confidence. We have to build confidence into the people to believe that we are and have got the integrity that we have.
Well, Fernando Alonso has said it's business as usual in Renault. It certainly looks like business as usual right now, and we'll find out how Fernando gets on today. But of course, it's not just bad news in Formula One at the moment. There's all sorts of good news spilling out as well, and yesterday there were some great headlines written as well in the qualifying session that showed us that Formula One can write headlines as brilliant as it's always managed to. Here's Nima Kinsey.
The moon was just another prop on the magnificent Singapore stage for this weekend's F1 qualifying. And although it wasn't full, the madness started early on. First, a quick gearbox change for Rubens Barrichello, and then Romain Grosjean forced into a three-point turn, more suited to a car park than a racetrack.
There is no brake efficiency, no brake efficiency. Okay, Romain, don't panic.
Good advice, but he still looked relieved to be out in Q1.
You don't feel so confident, and when you have the wall, the night, and a brake pedal that you don't know is going to happen.
Also struggling was Giancarlo Fisichella, who's yet to adapt to the differences between the Force India and the Ferrari.
It's not easy. It would be nice to have one complete day of testing, make it the feeling better, and even the setup better for myself.
But although teammate Kimi Räikkönen made it through to Q2, he could manage only 13th position. But also having a bumpy ride were the bronze. Rubens Barrichello having to use every inch of the track. But his woes were nothing though in comparison to Jenson Button's, who struggled with the handling of his car, the championship leader out in Q2.
It's been tough in qualifying. I mean, the first session we were quite quick, but the second session, Rubens and myself both struggled a little bit. But obviously with the lockup, it cost me so much time, and I don't know how far I was outside the top 10, but I don't think it was too far. So that's it. 12th on the grid, which is disastrous, really.
In Q3, Lewis Hamilton set an early quick time, enough for provisional pole, but Vettel and Rosberg were charging hard behind, hoping to eclipse the world champion. That was until this happened, bringing out a red flag and an expensive end to Barrichello's qualifying.
You still out-qualified Jenson, that's your main aim?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's right now is a although we got to think that there are more people fighting for the championship, my biggest fight is against him. So yeah, I'm happy. I had a pretty good session considering everything, and it was just unfortunate that I end up on the wall.
Well, it was a disastrous session for us. I think we were perilously close to losing both cars in Q2. Q3 wasn't bad, I think, when you see the fuel weights, but that sort of topped off a bad session for us.
The session restarted with 26 seconds to go, but it was not enough time to get back out on track, leaving the chasing pack, especially Sebastian Vettel, frustrated at having to settle for second, but happy to be in front of his championship rivals.
Obviously, it's good for us if the bronze are far away. I think they were struggling a little bit today, even though they looked very strong in practice, I have to say. So, I wouldn't mind when they don't finish tomorrow's race, but you know, this is out of our hands, so we have to focus on us. It's a hard job, a long race, quite hot here, so and dark, so it's not easy.
But there was no doubt about the happiest driver at the end of a long, hot day. Lewis Hamilton bagging his 3rd pole position of the year and his 2nd consecutive start from the front of the grid.
I believe in terms of our strategy compared to where we have been in the past, I think it's quite competitive. So that's why to be at the front and be on a strong strategy like we are is definitely a blessing.
So Hamilton starts from pole position with a lighter Sebastian Vettel alongside him. Rosberg equals his best qualifying position in 3rd. Last year's winner Fernando Alonso starts from 5th. A late change means Rubens Barrichello moves up to 9th after Nick Heidfeld was found to be running underweight. He's since changed his gearbox and engine and will start from the pit lane. That means everyone moves up a place. Jenson Button now starts from 11th, whilst Tony Liuzzi is right at the back of the grid in his Force India.
Right, it's just over half an hour until lights out here for the Singapore Grand Prix. Very shortly, Lewis Hamilton will be jumping in this car and taking it to pole position on the grid. And it's the 3rd pole position in the past 4 races for Lewis Hamilton. Of course, I'll say this quietly. 2 weeks ago, he was on pole in Monza. He didn't finish the race, pushing for 3rd position. He managed to crash the car. Well, we'll be hoping for something a little bit better than that this weekend. And you can see, if you look at the back of the garage, Lewis is in here. But it's a very different challenge and a very different circuit for the drivers here. There's all sorts of things for them to get their heads around. And just before Lewis made his way into the garage, Lee McKenzie caught up with him for a quick chat.
Lewis, it's getting dark here, but it's still so hot. I mean, what can you do as a driver to keep cool, to keep calm, to keep relaxed?
I've got to drink a lot, so I've got, and it's not Nescafe, but even though it's our sponsor, but I'm just trying to drink as many fluids as possible. It's so hot here and humid. As soon as I get in my suit, I'm going to be sweating and undoubtedly probably going to lose 1 to 2 kilos here. So I'm trying to minimize that. But the best thing is to be relaxed in your room, try and have a little bit of a cooler room, like an air-conditioned room. But yeah, so that's what I'm working on.
What time did you get to the circuit today?
Well, it's just coming up for 7 o'clock, and I got here at, I think I got here at just past 5 o'clock. I've had some appearances since then, and engineering meetings, and then we just did the drivers' parade. And I have to say, it's overwhelming. The fan base here is incredible, and I tell you, it's probably the closest to the UK. I mean, in the UK, we had the best fan showing last year. Even in 2007 at Silverstone, but I tell you, here is probably the closest we've got to that, and it's incredible the support we got here.
Have you stayed on European time? Because it's quite strange. You come in at 3 o'clock and you say morning, and then you think, hold on a second, it's about to get dark.
Yeah, I have stayed on European time, which has been pretty tricky. So what I do is I go to bed at 5, 6 a.m. and then I wake up at 2 p.m. during the day. So it's kind of weird, but the hotel, Hilton, really took care of us this week, as they always do. And they blacked out my windows, so the sunlight doesn't come through, so it feels like I'm, you know, not in European time still.
And just finally, when I spoke to you yesterday, you, for obvious reasons, had a big smile in your face after qualifying. I imagine that grin got even bigger when you saw the weights. It looks a very sweet strategy. You're at the front and you're by no means the lightest car.
Absolutely. Well, normally if we're at the front, then I really have my work cut out on my strategy, but it actually appears that we're on one of the strongest strategies, and but anything can happen in the race, and we just got to make sure we do the best job we can, and fingers crossed it'll be a good race, so I really hope so.
Lewis, thanks for taking the time to speak to us. Bye.
And later on we'll discuss the fuel weights with Ted Kravitz. You can find out just what strategy Lewis Hamilton is on and just what his chances are of picking up a win here in Singapore. David, interestingly, I actually spoke to Lewis earlier this morning, and he said he feels that he owes the team after crashing the car last time out. It's a rather strange mentality coming into a race 2 weeks later, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm really surprised. Normally drivers are over the crash as soon as they understand who is responsible, and in his case he held his hands up and said he just dropped the ball. You know, if there had been a technical issue, then you might still be thinking of it, but yeah, it's a nice thing for him to say, but frankly, I thought he'd just be concentrating on turning that pole position into a win.
And he looks a happy boy. Pole position important around a street circuit like this.
Yeah, it was a great performance yesterday. Obviously, the last part of qualifying was cut short. I think Sebastian Vettel probably would have taken the pole, but nonetheless, the amount of fuel that Lewis has on board, that was a great lap.
OK, drivers are in cars, engines are roaring, everybody's getting ready to go to the grid. The Singapore Grand Prix is not far away. Right, lights out, the race coming your way very shortly, but what a dramatic qualifying session it was for Brawn GP. David Coulthard described it as the low point in the season for them, so let's just quickly pop in if we can and have a quick word with Ross Brawn, who I'm sure has had a very busy bunch of guys working for him for the last few hours. Ross, first of all, just talk us through your thoughts when you saw Rubens greeting the wall at the very end of qualifying yesterday.
Well, they kind of put a full stop to a fairly disappointing qualifying. We still don't understand it, but we look very good on Friday. We run fuel the whole time. We look fine on Saturday morning, and even Q1 didn't look too bad. But once we got into Q2, or didn't get into Q3 with Rubens, with Jensen, it all started to fall apart. So that sort of capped very difficult qualifying.
I think disastrous was the word that you used. Do you feel as negative about it the following day as you did about 20 hours ago?
You never do. You always start to try and look for the positives. And we heard this morning that Nick Heidfield's taken a 15th-place penalty. That puts us on the good side of the grid, 9th and 11th, so little mercies. Two very good drivers, very experienced drivers, and in these circumstances, difficult track. I think we've got to bide our time and just hope opportunities come.
Moving up the grid a couple of places is a nice small crumb of comfort for you. The big crumb of comfort is if we take a look behind you, we can see, although a bit of bodywork is missing, that is the entirely rebuilt car that Rubens Barrichello is going to be racing. Now, if this was a normal road car, it would either be a write-off or a few months in a garage or something like that. Just talk us through the amount of effort and work that your guys have gone to today to get that car rebuilt in time for the race.
Well, the saviour was the survival cell. The main structure of the car and the gearbox weren't damaged. So all the damage was left-hand suspension. We had to replace all of that. We have to replace bodywork. We took some precautionary changes on other components, but luckily the survival cell, which I must say are very tough these days, was relatively untouched, and we managed to get it done on the Parc Fermé conditions, which limits the amount of time we have. We have a bit of time after qualifying. We have this morning, and they've done a great job, as always, to put it back together.
So if we'd have been here a few hours ago, we would have seen the entire left-hand side of the car missing, I imagine.
We stuck it on last night because the FIA wanted to weigh the car after qualifying in order to be able to announce the fuel weight. So we had to get the car back into a representative form by the end of yesterday, and then the car was weighed. This morning we've sort of gone through it with a fine-tooth comb and put it all together properly.
It's amazing to see the work that goes on. I suppose the question is, how is this going to affect the race for Rubens? Very quickly, him mentally, when a driver has a crash at the very end of qualifying and doesn't get a chance to drive the car in anger until the start of the race, is there a psychological element to it?
I don't think so for people of Rubens' experience. I think with a young driver, if he doesn't understand what's going on, I mean, Rubens trying a bit too hard, got on the dust, and here when you get on the dust is finished. You saw that with Mark's accident on Friday. So I don't think it affects him. And he'll know where not to go in the race.
OK, and finally, talking about the race, what's the best you can hope for today? Because, of course, if it really, really went your way, you could be crowned Constructor World Champions today.
Well, that would be a delight, but I'm not really thinking that far ahead. Scoring some strong points today would be a great result. But weather here is difficult, track's difficult, safety cars, all sorts of things. So we'll stay on our toes, and who knows.
Thanks a lot.
Great. OK, thanks.
Well, there won't be much time for sightseeing for Rubens Barrichello, will there, today? Look at this beautiful aerial shot of the wonderful Singapore night race parade as Kimi Raikkonen makes his way out of the garage and down to the grid. 3 million watts of power lighting up the track here. That's 4 times brighter than a football stadium. You can see the Singapore flyer in the background there, and 500 million people worldwide gearing up to watch the race. And many of those people, I'm sure, will be fans of Team Red Bull. We spoke before this weekend started. We said, well, this doesn't really suit Red Bull, a track like this. They didn't do particularly well at Valencia. Monaco wasn't really their preferred option. Sitting 2nd and 4th on the grid, it's really looking good for them. And both drivers continue to talk about winning the world title despite the big points gap.
Yeah, well, there's really no benefit in them chucking in the towel now. Why would they do that? There's 40 points still on the board. And the other thing, of course, is coming into this race, we were basing the projection on the previous street circuit, which was Valencia. Well, Red Bull came with some upgrades on the car, front wing, some other adjustments at the back of the car, and clearly the combination of track temperature, tyre and those adjustments have made them more competitive.
You've been pretty good, Eddie, at predicting when we're going to have a big weekend for the championship. Do you think this is a big weekend, possibly a big first lap for the championship if the Brawns fly away, if the Brawns struggle in the midfield and Red Bull fly off into the distance?
I think I've just seen Hamilton in superb form, and I think it'll be very unlikely if he doesn't win this race. He should win this race. It's his to lose somewhat. The Red Bulls have been a big surprise that they've got themselves together. I'm not sure how good their strategy is, but I think if you really analyse where Jensen is, he's looking at it differently. He's discounting everyone else, and he's just thinking about Rubens at the moment. And the way his strategy is done with the fuel and stuff, he thinks he can finish within a position or two, either in front or behind Rubens, and that's good enough for the World Championship. He's been very clever at the moment.
How much of a concern is this, though? Jensen Button qualified in the midfield in Spa, ended up being knocked out on the first lap. They've had a little fiddle around with the first corner here. We'll find out about that from Martin when he does his track guide later on. So it may well make it very tasty when the cars are down to that first corner. Being in the midfield is not where you want to be.
No, definitely not. He'd much rather take a conservative race from the front of the grid than try and be thinking about just picking up a few points from the middle of the grid. A very tight turn 1 and also a very tight turn 3. There's a lot of room for incident here, and of course also when you talk about the amount of dust that's offline, if he gets pushed a little bit offline, we saw what happened to Rubens in qualifying, it just sucks you into the wall, so he'll be a little bit uncomfortable with that grid position.
And I'm sure many people might have been tuning in expecting us to talk about the weather, because every day that we've been here, we've been told, oh, there's going to be some thunderstorms today in Singapore. It threatens it. It feels like it permanently, but as yet we've had no sight of rain at all. If it did come down, it would be another first for Formula One. Formula One cars under lights at night in the rain. That could really cause some issues.
I don't want to think about it. It's a frightening thought, but it's an exciting thought. Because we all know what rain does to races, and wet races have traditionally been the most exciting of all. And if that was to happen here, first of all, I think the race would go 2 hours, which is the mandatory maximum it can be, because it's a very long race in any case. So fingers crossed we'll have a dry race. I think everyone wants to see who the fastest man is here.
We saw Nico Rosberg thundering past just a second ago, making an awful lot of noise. Great qualifying for him. He sits third on the grid, his best qualifying of the season. Thank you, Jensen. Williams have talked all season long about the fact they've tailored their car for these kind of circuits, and it seems to be paying dividends. Not had a podium for a long time though, has he?
They haven't, and if you go to the previous Grand Prix, they were really struggling for pace, and it just shows how unpredictable this Grand Prix season is. They have come with upgrades. Clearly they've worked around the bumpy street circuit of Singapore. I think Williams are really doing a great job when you consider they're one of the only true privateer teams out there.
McLaren and Red Bull at the front. Nico Rosberg pushing for his first podium in a long time, and the bronze in the middle. It's shaping up very nicely for the race. Martin Brundle's out on the grid for us. And Martin, people talked last year about the grid being the most electric and exciting atmosphere of anywhere during the calendar.
Of that, there is absolutely no doubt. Expectant crowd, grandstands full, flyovers going over the first corner, lightning up in the sky, but apparently that rainstorm is not heading towards the racetrack. It's going to rain here one of these years, but it's a 1 hour 50 race anyway, so any kind of safety car or rain means that we'll be timed out at 2 hours. The Singapore flyer up there looking down on the racetrack. One thing we haven't got yet is our World Championship leader, Jensen Button, has only just left the pit lane. We're 22 minutes from the start of the race, and he's not here on the grid, suggesting to me he's not absolutely happy with the car. So we may try and come back and find out why, but I think we need to move on. Meanwhile, let's take a look at Rubens Barrichello, who's busy in here doing an interview, and we just need to talk to Rubens, see how his car was. Of course, his car was very, very badly damaged in qualifying yesterday. He has no warm-up, can't afford to do laps through the pits. He needs to save the fuel, and we want to find out now. Rubens, how does your car feel after the repair?
I felt okay. I mean, it's a slow lap. You're saving fuel as much as you can, but everything is okay.
So did they have much chassis damage or gearbox or anything like that?
It was a very, very small shunt. I mean, it looked a little bit bigger because I went backwards, and that little wall, movable wall, brought me back. But the chassis was okay. They had to repair the floor because in qualifying it was damaged. And from here, I need to look forward.
But with Heidfeld out, you now start on the clean side of the track, and I can hear the fans at home saying, come on, it's a piece of tarmac. How could it be any different from a few meters away? But it's significant, isn't it?
It does make a difference. I mean, I was looking into the BMW race. The boys were trying to overtake, going to the inside, and just being on the pit wall, you could see a lot of dust. So it does make a difference starting from this side.
And your mirror's full of Jensen Button.
Well, I hope not, but it could be.
Good luck. Let's wander down and see who else we can find Ed, Daddy Button here. John, what's the matter with your boy? Why is he late on the grid?
Burning a bit of fuel off, I think.
Okay, so he was 10 laps longer than. He wants to go a little bit shorter in the race.
I don't know actually what the. I honestly really don't know. I keep out of it, so I don't say the wrong thing.
All right, I wish him luck. I've got a present for him. Look, day glow stick. It's really dark out there. You break it and make sure he's eating his carrots. I'll try and catch him. Mr. Ecclestone coming down with the Prime Minister, apparently. Yeah, I guess so. We'll do a quick flyby for a minute. Where's this Prime Minister, Bernard? It's not that lady, is it? She's an interview. We'll catch him on the way back. Let me just... you want me to... hello, sir. Martin Brundle, BBC. I think we had a quick BS. How are you? Good to see you again. So, is the rain going to stay off for us this year?
I hope so. Looks like a very pleasant evening ahead, an exciting one.
This is going to be a fascinating Grand Prix for many reasons, with strategies and who gets away off the start. Who do you fancy? Who do you think can win this race?
Hamilton is right in front, so I'm rooting for him.
All right, thanks for the great hospitality we've had in Singapore. Let's go down and find some drivers. And Tamara Ecclestone, Tamara, you've had a busy weekend.
Yes, I've been in the gym and I've had a great weekend. So were you there earlier?
Parties galore, but good. Who do you think is going to win the race today?
Lewis, for sure.
Okay, I think you're right. Lewis at the front, got more fuel than anybody else and got the KERS button. But I'm told that Lewis's long run pace is not very good. I think they're hurting their rear tyres, and this is going to be a race all about who can keep their rear tyres intact. And I wouldn't mind talking to Teflonso if he's around, but he's not. So let's have a word with Nico Rosberg. Nico, you must be thoroughly satisfied with your qualifying performance.
Yeah, to be honest, it worked really well yesterday. I was even a bit surprised. I didn't expect to go that far up, and no, third is really good. And I'm looking forward to a strong race also. I mean, I have more fuel than Sebastian. I'm on the better side of the grid, so some way or other I hope to beat him, and Lewis is going to be a bit more difficult.
Yeah, but you're pretty good off the start as well. Like, you normally gain a car. It's about 8 meters. Well, it is exactly 8 meters between the cars, but you reckon you can have him down into one, yeah?
I reckon, yes.
Because you can wreck their strategy, because I think they've got a very good car on long runs, haven't they? You've got to get in there and spoil it. But what do you think is the pace of Hamilton?
Well, he looked very strong in qualifying, in his third part of qualifying with the fuel, so I think it's going to be difficult to beat him today. But maybe I can beat him too at the start. I don't know. I mean, the advantage he has is the KERS, obviously. With the push of the button, he's going to have 80 horsepower more, so it's going to be difficult.
1 hour 50 for the race, plus safety car, plus anything else that goes on. I mean, that's a lot of concentration.
Yeah, well, did it last year, so it shouldn't be a problem to do it again.
Do you wear a clear visor or tinted?
No, I have a clear visor.
Okay, good stuff. We've got a little bit more time available. Let's see if we can find somebody else at the sharp end of the grid. Mark Webber is not there at the moment. Sebastian Vettel, there's an army of cameras down here looking at him, and I think probably a snowball in hell's chance of getting a chat with us. It's Tanya talking. A quick word for BBC Live. Sebastian, front row of the grid, but you really expected to be on pole, didn't you?
Well, we were targeting, yes. So, but the red flag came out. Anyway, now we are here second. So it's a long race. So 61 laps, long way to go. Will be tough. So let's see.
Let's take a look at the racetrack for this Singapore Grand Prix. 3.2 miles, 23 turns, 1 3/4 minutes each lap. I may have slowed it down a little. Some changes down here at turn 1. They've elongated the run into a slower first corner apex, creating this no man's land so they can have a dedicated pit lane exit. Much better, because last year the pit lane fed straight into the racing line. Turns 2 and 3 follow closely. The infamous turn 10 chicane where Raikkonen crashed last year. Again, it's slower and tighter now, approaching at 180 miles an hour. All the drivers will see are these day-glow orange caps, quite high curbs that can launch the car if you arrive out of control. Threading the car through there will be quite difficult. No space on the outside if you get it wrong. a very small run-up area in the straight-ahead position, but there is an escape road up the inside. I'm still not sure the drivers are going to be happy with this layout at turn 10. Turn 17, a 90-degree left-hander, 80 miles an hour at the slowest point on the apex, hard acceleration through the exit, renamed now, of course, Piquet's corner. This is where he dropped it and spread it down the inside wall. Normally, not a difficult corner. The biggest change for me is this penultimate turn 22. Last year, it was a long, sweeping arc, accelerating into the pit straight. Now they've created a dedicated pit-in lane, which has moved the apex of turn 22 quite a long way outboard, tightened the corner up by at least one gear. Now the drivers are going to have to work really hard through here. For me, a significant change.
Well, they've made some changes to the circuit here, a few of them necessary. Lewis Hamilton's described this evening as a nice Sunday evening drive. Well, we've seen lightning around the circuit. If it does start to rain here, it certainly won't be anything like a nice Sunday evening drive.
No, it's into unknown territory. I have seen some testing footage of a underlight wet event in Australia, and they see that they've got the glare under control. But I think it's a big difference when you're dealing with spray from 20 cars.
OK, well, Martin's left the grid, but let's now join Ted Kravitz on the pit wall. Ted, we never really saw the natural conclusion of qualifying. Rubens Barrichello's incident put paid to that. How has that affected the way the cars are lined up on the grid for the race?
Well, it means, Jake, that Vettel would have been on pole. And I have to be a bit quiet because he's standing right next to me. He's only got 42 kilos of usable race fuel on board. Rosberg, we heard on the grid, has got more. He's got 48 kilos. Lewis has got 51 kilos of usable race fuel on board. So Lewis is heaviest and quickest. Red Bull looking good for the podium, though, and Button on a very solid strategy, Jake, that should see him beat championship rival Rubens Barrichello, which is very interesting. So let's have a look at the estimated first stop laps, shall we? This is what to watch out for. Vettel and Webber in 16 and 17. Rosberg, Barrichello, Alonso and Glock all pit within a lap of each other. Hamilton could go all the way to lap 20, while Jenson Button is on a long first stint two-stop, going all the way to lap 28.
Thanks a lot, Ted. It's that time of the season now where we're sort of talking about two races, the championship race and the race for today. We'll talk about the race for this particular race in a moment, but Jenson Button there with an awful lot of fuel. He's looking good there, Eddie.
He is looking good, but, you know, in the last couple of races he's been very tentative off the line, and I think here he's not going to get away with that. I think he has to be semi-aggressive, not over-aggressive, but he has to stamp his mark on this race, and he has to stamp his mark for the last couple of races if he's going to have real credibility as a world champion. OK, Jarno Trulli's due to leave Toyota at the end of this season. He's gearing up for what potentially could be his final race in Singapore. We were talking about Jenson Button, though, there, and there's a small crumb of good news for him. He's moved on to the good side of the grid, the grippier side of the grid, because of a penalty for Nick Heidfeld. Here's Nick's team boss to explain what's happened.
Well, Mario, strange what happened to Nick. Was that just a mistake, not putting enough ballast in the car?
Yeah, it was a mistake. Originally, we didn't know what the reason was for the weight difference. And we then found out that the ballast weight was not correctly placed, so we gave an indication to the FIA, and the consequences, we go back.
So it would have given you some speed in qualifying, but that it wasn't intentional?
No, definitely not. If it was intentional, we wouldn't have indicated it.
OK, thanks, Mario.
Well, the reason the cars take ballast, Eddie, is to make sure that they're all of the same weight, to make sure that they're fair at a minimum weight. How would a mistake like that have slipped through the net at BMW?
Well, because it's added on, and very often you have different things, different floor weights, and where you put the weight can affect a car. If you want a car to understeer or oversteer, you will move the weight accordingly to give you the best balance for a driver's comfort, and obviously lap time. So obviously something went awry here, and one of the designers or the engineers, they forgot to put it in.
David Coulthard's former teammate, 1999 world champion Mika Häkkinen, having a chat on the grid there. Right, let's focus our attention now on this race. Who have you got your eye on, David? Either of the Red Bull drivers, or is it Jenson Button or Rubens Barrichello that you think is going to have an interesting afternoon here?
Well, obviously, I'm curious to see what's going to happen up front. I think that Nico Rosberg, I'm curious to see whether his pace can play out and maintain that. This is going to be a race about tyre wear. The rear tyres, especially the option, is running out very quickly, and whichever guy can manage his tyres best here is going to be the strongest when it comes to obviously that crucial final stop and getting track position.
I need one word to give me a winner.
Oh, he's been supreme all weekend, Hamilton.
Yeah, it's difficult to argue against that.
OK, right. There's been an awful lot of talk about Formula One just recently. It's time for that to stop and the racing to start. It's time for the Singapore Grand Prix in the company of Martin Brundle and Jonathan Ledyard.